So basic goal of this presentation is to explain the differences between andragogy and pedagogy. These are two important terms in terms of adult education or adult learning. So there is a whole field, as I just mentioned, which really specifically talks and discusses about adult education. And there are specific theories which present different ideas about how to teach adult learners. So we would address two very key fundamental terms, andragogy and pedagogy, and maybe you have heard, some of you have already heard these terms before, but we will just kind of learn a little bit more about them today. Identify the characteristics of adult learners. So we all have adult learners in our classes, so we'll try to see what are some of the characteristics, because in this particular theory or in this particular idea, the focus is on adult learners. So we really want to learn what do we mean by when we say adult learner. So learn the 6 principles of adult learning theory. So adult learning has basically 6 principles, and they guide, they can be very helpful guide for the instructors to use in their work to teach adult learners in their classes. Identify your current beliefs or practices of adult learning and identify at least one strategy for adult instruction that aligns with your current beliefs or practices. So these are some of the objectives for today's presentation. So what do you think are some important characteristics of adult learners? So when you think of adult learner, what comes to your mind? Maybe you can write a word or two under this question. So anything what comes to your mind in terms of adult learners in your classes or the students? Yes, they are juggling many things. Absolutely, exactly. Mm-hmm.
It was also mentioned that say after 26 years, our brain will not grow.
That's a very good myth we need to address in adult learning. So when I teach neuroscience aspect or brain science aspect of adult learning, I address that question as well in my classes. So to be honest, brains, the latest research about brain science and aging says that actually people start brain degeneration in really late ages, in 80s or 90s, when the Alzheimer and all those things start. So if you are in 50s, 60s, it's not that like that so far.
Yeah, I also don't buy that actually, because I constantly learn new things, so I don't buy it. Yeah.
Exactly. You're so right. My mother is a very tech savvy, and she's in her 70s. So all her technology she learned after 60s. Okay, so yes, I can see some of the responses here. So they are juggling in many things in life. They only want to learn what they want to learn, and they want to know why. So actually, you're already giving away my presentation for today. So yes, these are some of the key ideas which are important for adult learners. My second important things are motivations and barriers. So as you kind of, alluded on to some of these ideas, that there are some motivation, like why adults want to learn. So many of the adult learners, especially in this age and time, are here to learn because of the careers, and they have to go back to school. They need to learn some of those skills. And many of us actually try to, whenever we have to learn something, we quickly Google it. So Google is our instant, quick fix to find out any information about learning. So these are some of the ideas. So basically, adult learning really focuses a lot on adult learners and the idea that we should know our learners and and to create our own learning experiences and to create students' learning experiences. So the idea Andragogy, it all started from here. He is Malcolm Knowles. So Malcolm Knowles was born in 1913 and he died in 1997. He's known as the father of adult learning. In 1940s, he was the director of adult education at YMCA in Boston, which led to a book entitled Informal Education in 1950s. In 1960s, he accepted a position at the Boston University, and he was teaching from an initially informal environment, and then he became an academic. And later he became a visiting professor. So he introduced this idea of andragogy to the field of adult learning in the United States. So it is not his own original idea, but he presented this idea. This idea was originally he learned from a Yugoslavian educator, and he later mentioned that in his own work as well. So what is andragogy and pedagogy? So in chat, very quickly, please write, what do you understand by the term pedagogy? Like, we all use this term as teachers all the time. Pedagogy. Teaching methodology. Yes, perfect. Exactly. So it is a generic term which was basically used to understand what is teaching methodology, and we basically use it a lot. But actually, I will give you some difference here. So andragogy is basically, I'll explain first andragogy, and then we'll talk about the differences between andragogy and pedagogy. So andragogy is a European concept, as I mentioned, which means the art and science of helping adult learners learn. Knowles, as I mentioned, he introduced this idea, and he learned it from Yugoslavian educator initially. But before that, this idea was even used by a German educator, Alexander Kapp, in 1833. So it isn't a very new idea. It has been around, and it has been a very part and parcel of kind of an idea in European culture. And I think in many other cultures, the idea of lifelong learning has been always there. But in adult learning field, or especially in the United States, I think it came pretty late. Lindenman also used the term andragogy in his book. He's also a very renowned scholar of adult learning in 1926. So based on Merriam and Webster's dictionary, pedagogy means the art and science or profession of teaching. So just specifically talks about teaching, but andragogy is an art or science of teaching adults. So for the purpose of this presentation, consider the major difference between the two terms as the way adult versus the children. We teach adult versus the children. So this is the basic, major difference in terms of thinking about andragogy and pedagogy. So andragogy deals with adult, and pedagogy deals with children. Learning instruction, the assumption according to Knowles is that adults are self-directed as compared to children who are driven by their teachers or by instructors or their family or parents or something like that. Experience, in terms of experience, many of the adults come to the learning environment with a lot of experiences as compared to children who come with fewer or little experience. Motivation, usually adult learners have intrinsic motivation. They want to learn based on their own desire to learn, as compared to children who are told that they are supposed to go to school and they should learn something. Andragogy is usually centered on problem centered. So for example, adults, when they come across a problem, they really want to find an answer, or especially in our life, if we need to file taxes, we quickly go, okay, now I need to learn this. Or if we are going for a trip, oh, maybe I need to learn about this new country and something like that. So we go by based on problem-centered learning as compared to content-centered learning, which is usually for children. So Knowles presented 6 principles. So first principle is adult learners are internally motivated and are self-directed, exactly which I mentioned. Adult learners accumulate a growing reservoir of experience, which is rich resource of learning. And adults need, the third principle is adults need to know the reason for learning something. Adults are most interested in subjects that have immediate relevance to their work, and adults learning is problem-centered rather than the content-oriented, and adults respond better to internal versus external motivation. So these are the key 6 principles. And when we as a teachers or instructors design our courses or design our overall learning experiences or lessons for students, some of these ideas can help us think about the role of the teacher. So what would be the role of a teacher in terms of adult learning theory? So in the adult learning theory, the role of teacher is very egalitarian, and it's assumed just a facilitator. The teacher is not supposed to be the sage on the stage and telling the students what they're supposed to do, but just to be on the side and guiding them in terms of their experiences, like how to navigate and achieve their own goals, whatever they have in the learning process. Role of the learner, the assumption is the learner is self-directed. So the teacher, in that case, the learner is supposed to take the ownership of the learning, their own learning. It's not they are supposed to always being taught you're supposed to do this or something like that. They are supposed to initiate the learning process in some way or shape and continue with that, but the teacher is supposed to support them. Curriculum should be based on the idea that it includes the students' goals and what they really want to achieve and provides that room for that as well. And in terms of teaching strategies, that should be a lot. I would talk, I think, a little bit more in detail about teaching and assessment strategies as compared to right now. Yeah. So for example, in terms of teaching strategies, provide opportunities and structures where students can take ownership of their learning. Promote independent and self-directed learning by reducing support gradually. So constant, you can start with the support, but slowly you need to remove that support from students so they become more and more independent learner. Allow students to explore the topics of their interest within course limits. Yes, we all have that limit, that we have this specific area of area which we need to cover in our courses, but how we can really tailor it to some extent that incorporates some of the students' interest as well. Connect classroom learning with their life experiences. So in some way, so for example, in some of my classes, I have students from nursing, I have students from kinesiology or different other disciplines. So how you tailor your assignments and activities that they can share their experiences, they can bring their experiences in the classroom. Explain why is necessary for them to learn in certain topic or skill. This is very, very important. Sometimes we want to teach students some things and they feel it's totally irrelevant and it's a waste of their time, and that's why they have lower motivation in classroom. So giving some time and spending some time in terms of thinking about why it is important and how it would help them in future is very important. Adjust activities based on students' feedback. So do solicit students' feedback, and if they provide you some ideas, you can incorporate in your teaching, and you can always your lesson plan and teaching should not be always very rigid, that it doesn't have any room for movement. You can communicate early on in the classroom that things will be adjusted and changed with time. So you can make some of those, because sometimes we feel like we don't want to change things during the semester to disturb anything. And in the end, when we come to the end, it's a disaster for everybody in that sense. So it's okay to change few things and do communicate that level of flexibility in your classroom early on. So time management in adult learners, I think this is the biggest one, because many of the learners in our classes are working full time sometimes. They might have children, they have families, maybe they are caregivers in that sense. So allowing some space in your in your assignments and all those places where they can pick or choose, like on this date I can present, or maybe there is some space where they can manage their time and your time, whatever you have suggested, or maybe you can have some negotiation about that time as well. So giving some space, that's very important. Peer relationships and peer learning, that's really, really important. In many, there's a lot of research about this specific area, which talks about that students do learn, especially adult learners, learn more from their peers as compared to their instructors. So do have those opportunities in your classrooms where they can learn from each other, they can give feedback to each other, they can look at each other's work. So this make the learning process more collaborative in that sense, and relationship building. So believe to achieve, this is another very, is a strategy suggested by some of the scholars in the field, that let them believe that they can achieve. It's not something impossible. So giving that confidence, because self-confidence, self-concept is very important for adult learners, and they have this ego issue usually in the, like, it's a very, very strong idea of sense of self when adult learners are there in learning. So you need to reinforce that idea. Yes, they are able to learn, they will be able to learn, and it's doable. Real world application, value, and sense of purpose. So you have to kind of reinstate that idea again and again in your classes. Small group activities for peer support and to reduce judgment. Yeah, this is very helpful, and this really worked, especially in my own classes. Students really do not like to, especially adult learners, to speak out in larger groups, especially in online environments. You can see now many of us are here, but with the cameras off, and it's really hard for somebody to speak out in this environment. So to reduce that kind of stress, you need to provide an alternative spaces where people can really share some of their ideas and feel comfortable. Choice and tasks, that's really important. If you are giving 3 assignments, maybe giving option for 4 and letting them choose. So that allows the sense of ownership, sense of control, and help students to choose what they really like. So in that sense, that's very helpful. 70-30% rule, discussion and lecture. So adult learners like to speak if they feel comfortable in the environment. So usually it's a good idea to have reduced the lecture. You can start with a heavy lecture if you're very content heavy instructor in that sense, but slowly moving it more towards discussion and incorporating their ideas and views in terms of learning can really be helpful and can work really well. Process comprehension questions, open-ended questions, and give prompts. So some of these ideas are very important. Another idea is see, do, and teach. So in this idea, we all know about experiential learning. So we learn really well when we experience something. So in that sense, allow your students in some form and shape where they can not only learn from reading or writing, but also can do some of those things. And one way of doing is teaching somebody else. So if you can create those peers or peer mentorship within your classrooms, that would be a very good idea in that sense. Emotional memory. So storytelling, currently in adult learning, storytelling is becoming a very popular strategy. So creating some form and shape of storytelling, or if it allows because in chemistry, how you would do that, or in mathematics, how you would do that. So some of those ideas, maybe you have to think creatively and see what works for you and what doesn't work for you in that sense. So last, I think some of the so I really talked a lot about strategies, how we can help as instructors to our students, but I think it's really important that we also pay attention to our self-care and take care of ourselves. We did just a little while ago another study of instructors who were teaching online in an online environment during pandemic, and how they experience teaching and learning and help their students. So some of the things which they shared, those instructors, I found very fascinating, and I think it was there's some good ideas which I can share here. So many instructors, because those were nursing instructors, nursing professors, so they said they were usually not very good in terms of setting boundaries for themselves when they started teaching online. And they were always checking their courses, online systems, responding to students all the time. So setting boundaries was really, really important. So if you're teaching online, you also have to pay attention to yourself, your own mental health, and your own, even teaching in person, very important. Disconnecting from being online 24/7. So you need to find some ways. And like one teacher, she shared, she doesn't check her online teaching system after 5 p.m. So she kind of put that boundary on herself. So, but she learned it quite after, like in the middle of the pandemic, quite after going through a lot of, chaos in that sense. But she eventually figured out, like, I need to set these boundaries. Interact with others. This was a very important point. Many of the instructors found a lot of value in talking to each other. So they kind of found a lot of information from their senior colleagues and friends, and they talked to them. And also mentorship, I think, was really, really important. If you are new into the environment, new to online teaching and learning in that sense. So learning from from senior faculty is very, very helpful. And many of them mentioned especially that they found a lot of help and support from senior faculty. Embracing mindfulness, so mindfulness, meditation, and having mantras. So some of these things you will, I think, hear a lot from in this mental health track today. Even in yesterday's presentation, we heard some of these ideas. So yes, these ideas people were trying, and they mentioned that they actually work for them, at least in our study. So exercising, so many people mentioned in our study that they never really were very consistent with their exercising, but exercising really helped them in terms of thinking about with their work, how they do their work and all that stuff. In terms of, these are some of my ideas based on the adult learning theories. For the sake of a discussion, maybe we can think about what kinds of classroom or training activities have been most effective for you as an adult learner. Maybe you can share on the Google Doc. So I do not want to act as an expert here. We are all learning from each other. So maybe you can share a few ideas on the Google Doc, and that can be helpful for everybody. And what are one or two activities that you usually use in as an instructor, which you think have really, really worked for you? And maybe in the end, we can all take a minute and reflect on the idea. What are some of the ideas from Knowles which you can use in your teaching and learning, and what you think can be very difficult or not really possible for you to apply in your specific context? Let me open my Google document. So we can share some of those ideas, and eventually I would be able to share this Google document with you, so you can see, I posted some of the resources as well in this document. So you can at some point, use these resources and watch these videos if you like to learn a little bit more about these ideas. There are some really nice books of adult learning if you want to learn. There's a lot of research, especially about the brain aging if you're teaching older adults in your teaching experiences. So you can use some of those ideas. So that would be helpful. So let's come to this reflection side, teaching strategies. So what are one or two activities that you usually use as an instructor which are very helpful? So maybe you can mention one or two strategies here in the Google Doc. So it seems like our time is almost up. So please feel free to add. I think I'll take 1 or 2 minutes more. So just add few ideas so we can conclude here. I hope some of these ideas you can have are helpful and you can use in your own teaching and learning. Yeah, so we are all here to learn from each other. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Yeah.
Dr. Bano, I don't know if you noticed in the chat that there was a suggestion to fill in some of your talking points into the Google Docs as well. That would be helpful.
If you want, I can share my PowerPoint. Would that be okay? Yeah. PowerPoint in the Google document. Yes, I can fill in. Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
And how will we access the Google Doc?
The link was provided in the chat.
Okay, so I think some of the ideas are here. So have students create student-generated instructional materials. I think that's a very interesting idea. Yes, and also having students teach me or instructor strategy in class. I play stupid and let them take the lead. That's a fun idea. Showing samples and discussing. Yes, peer and self-critique. What kinds? Yes, this is really a good idea. Peer review. I am a big believer on peer review. In our field, we have even, I think like all other fields, peer review is a big component of our research work as well. So when I teach research methods course, I especially incorporate peer review in my classes. So that's really, really a good strategy, because then students can see another perspective or another person's view on their work in that sense. So that's very, very helpful usually. So thank you so much, everybody. I think it's about time. It's 10:03 already. So if you have any last minute questions or comments, please feel free to share in the chat or just say it. But thank you so much.